Hello again, Steve here from the Inner Genie Project with a few comments on what we can learn from Trump's State of the Union address. The first thing I would say that I'm not going to mostly talk about the politics of it because I'm hoping to more go in the direction of what can we learn from the presentation style and his whole persona and his ability to get things done in the face of adversity, you might say. And the first thing I would say is I don't think it can be understated just how much the power of positive thinking plays into Trump's way of approaching things. I mean, after all, from the time he was a toddler, basically, he was fed the power of positive thinking, Norman Vincent Peale's philosophy on basically stating affirmations in the public. I mean, a lot of people accuse the guy of lying, although, from what I can see, is he's stating affirmations publicly and getting many people to state them publicly. For example, his move to say, we're going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it, for most people is basically two completely outrageous, asinine statements. One is we're going to build a wall. The second one is Mexico's going to pay for it. Which one appears to be the craziest? It appears to be that Mexico's going to pay for it. So he has thousands and millions of people going out there and saying, look at how stupid that is. Mexico's going to pay for the wall. But they're talking about the wall. He gets them talking about the wall. And that's an example of sort of the art of the deal blended with, which is his book, his famous book, the art of the deal blended with the power of positive thinking, which is to not only speak affirmations, but if you can get other people to speak your affirmation, it kind of comes into reality on its own. And this is just an example of Trump. So as far as his speech goes, you see a lot of that in play, right? A lot of people who hate him think that he's lying, but he's actually speaking affirmation because good chance he actually believes it. Now, one of the things that I notice about the way he approaches, and this is in terms of public presentation and just getting things done as a human interaction sort of way, Trump comes across as this very gregarious guy in a way. But who knows? Maybe he's actually a very shy guy privately. I don't know, because this stuff can be put on as an act. But he definitely comes in very confident. You see him walking in, he's got that sort of braggadocio look to him, right? And he's shaking hands, and he's got a way of shaking hands with people and pointing at them. He looks at them very briefly. It's like, I got you, you know. It's not just a quick shake hand. He's always connecting with people in a way. And that's a very positive way of building bridges between two people. And he does this throughout the speech. There's no hate on anybody. He's right there with those who absolutely hate him, including the white-robed women in there, who, incidentally, it's funny because the last group of white-dressed people in support of the Democrat Party was a radical racist organization known as the KKK. I think that was probably lost on them, but all those women dressed in white, I couldn't help but think they're a member of a racist cartel and they're wearing white. Not really a good idea. And they're mostly women of color and they're wearing white. Or a lot of them are. Kind of a little ironic, but I thought that's not to do with it. That's more of a political thing, but a statement. But well, the other thing too is he had something for everybody. I mean, many times when we do a presentation, we're talking to either the converted or we're talking to a rather narrow segment of people's interests. Think of somebody who's doing a presentation in front of a bunch of brain surgeons or in front of a bunch of engineers. Well, it's not that hard to get on side with where they're at. But when you're talking about a political spectrum, which is all over the map and a very, very divided, extremely divided and in times militant bunch of people, it's a challenge. But I think he was able to do that. Not only do I think he was able to do that, I observed it. Because except for Bernie Sanders, that is. Bernie Sanders had this grouchy old man on his face the entire time. He was basically told to be there, I guess, so he'd get paid. So he shows up and he just tries to curl up in a hole, but he can't quite because the camera's scrolled on him once in a while. But the most radical activist in this white-robed women's caucus of the Democrats was this Ocasio, whatever her name is, this crazy woman from the Bronx somewhere. And she was actually, looks like at times she was being told by her sisters to stand up once in a while. Because, there was things like, hey, you know what, there's more women in Congress. And she's still kind of sitting there, and somebody, maybe you should stand for this one. And shortly thereafter, Trump actually starts to joke with them. And this is Trump's nature. Trump's nature is to try to bring in even his enemies. Very Lao Tzu in a way. Is it Lao Tzu, the art of war? Keep your enemies close and your friends distant. And he's working with them, and he had them laughing, and he had them dancing, and there was some of them going like this and everything. And these are people who had this big scowl on their face minutes earlier. I thought that was pretty amazing. But he also touched on all the points, because when you have that large of a group, and you have, of course, this is going to be seen by millions of Americans, and they all have their passions, right? So he touched on a lot of things. He touched on the history of America. He touched on the First Lady, which, by the way, I don't know what she's got to do with anything, but it's a tradition, I guess. He touched on the veterans and the Jewish Holocaust, and enemies of America, China and North Korea. And if it was, if I wasn't in here, we'd probably be at war with North Korea. He touched on children. He touched on babies. He touched on abortion. He dared to touch on abortion. It's usually a taboo, but there's millions and millions and millions of Americans and people around the world that for them it's extremely passionate. So think of all the Catholics who typically vote Democrat, and now the Democrats are calling for infanticide, some of them. And all these Catholics tend to vote Democrats, but a lot of them tend to be very pro-life and wanting to, recognize the life within the mother's womb. He dared to touch on that. It's very, very powerful. Women empowerment he touched on. He touched on the wall, of course, and immigration. And he brought out a lot of emotion in each of these times he touched on it, because when he was talking about cancer research, he had a little child there who stood up and smiled, and she had chemotherapy. When he talked about veterans, he brought out several veterans from the war, and he brought out a Holocaust survivor, and he brought out a police who was shot by a mass shooter, and shot up by a mass shooter, and he survived 17 bullets or whatever. And he brought out, who else did he bring out there? Yeah, it seemed like an endless number of people. Trump's very good at that. You remember back during the debates, he had right in front of Bill and Hillary Clinton, he had some of Bill's women that he abused right in the front row, and you saw Bill kind of go like this. Trump is masterful at galvanizing everybody. So he had everybody in there, except for Bernie Sanders, I think, and perhaps some of those black guys wearing weird costumes, to stand and clap for him at times, which was pretty amazing. And of course, Pelosi, I mean, I can see why Pelosi, the main reason why Pelosi didn't want Trump to have this speech, which, by the way, that was another win for him, was that, Pelosi was like, no, we're not going to have it. She was trying to figure out a way not to have this State of the Union address, and they always have one. And Trump called off the government shutdown for enough. He's, playing like chess, right? So that she couldn't say it anymore. But the thing is, Pelosi, because she got to sit right behind Trump, she's got to show just how much of a scowler she is at so many things, and her face was wiggling and so on when he'd say certain things. And then she'd stand up because everybody else was standing up, and then she'd forget to sit down. You could see that she wasn't paying attention at all to it, or very absent-minded or something like that, right? Anyways, I think there's a lot we can learn from this. And also, too, at the end of his speech, he's there for a meet and greet in a way. He didn't just allow himself to be hustled off by the Secret Service. He's shaking hands. He's doing his old thing again, looking at people in the eyes, shaking their hands, signing autographs and what have you. Meet and greet, really connecting with people. So from a public presentation standpoint, in a way of sort of winning friends and influencing people, even our enemies, he doesn't come across as angry at them. He's accepting of them and so on. And he's giving something for all of them. He's giving them a reason to stand up and support what he's saying. And that's powerful. And you could see almost, especially in those women, that some of them kind of had this liking for Trump in a way, brief fleetingness, right? I mean, at a certain point, you could see this what is her name? Alexandria, whatever, this woman, this crazy socialist from the Bronx. She's got her head down and she's shaking, but she's got a smile on her face, because she's liking what she's hearing. She's liking the guy in that moment. It's really odd. And it's not really odd, I guess, because he's an alpha male and she can't resist that as a woman typically. And he's coming across as that. So that's another power play that he uses. So I think there's a lot we can learn. We can learn about how to enter with confidence and connect with people. We can learn to bring something for the audience, to connect with the audience, not to begrudge the audience, and to connect with them afterwards and so on. And there's just, a lot we can learn. So you know, whether we could hate the guy, we could disagree with him, and all sorts of stuff, but hey, we can learn from the best in a way, right? Like a very experienced individual. I remember Osho once said, somebody asked him, who did you learn the most about life from, or whatever it was, along that lines. And he said he learned the most from this thief. And, you know, he didn't agree with the thief. He didn't think that people should be thieves. But he learned a lot from him because he learned the thief could get up and face danger every day. And he learned a lot from that. So it doesn't matter whether we agree with somebody or not agree with somebody, we can learn from them. And whether you agree with Trump or don't agree with Trump, the guy is pretty masterful at getting things done. I mean, here he was, the first president who was never a politician in his life, never connected to government, and yet he wins against all the pundits and continues to win. He continues to get things done under just blistering, non-stop mainstream attack. I mean, what is it? 80% of the news or whatever is against Trump. So, whether you agree with him or not, the guy is pretty frickin' amazing. And if we could learn a thing or two from him, man, oh man, we could be successful in life in terms of our communication ability. Steve here again, great chatting. And if you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. And we'll talk again soon, hopefully.